Matthew White. I'm the founder of R&D Tax and Grants. We have been around since 2011, 2012. However, I've been involved in research and development taxes and government grants since 2005. So at a federal government level, it's the federal government's principal program to promote or encourage or incentivise Australian-based businesses in developing Australian intellectual property. So it works in two ways depending on the size of business you are in terms of turnover. So those with a turnover of under $20 million, it's 43.5 cent in the dollar refundable tax offset. What a refundable tax offset means is to the extent that you're tax payable, it will absorb your tax liability, and to the extent that you have no tax liability or you're making a loss, you can actually receive a physical cash refund from the ATO. Well, it's not just a software development industry specific incentive. It's a broad-based program where every single industry has the opportunity to take it up. In software, we need to make sure that we're not making claims for everyday engineering, and the work that we're doing is beyond what would be considered standard. Now, that can obviously be quite subjective depending on industry niche, expertise and application. So the test is ultimately around the establishment of new knowledge, and the technology ultimately you need to prove is not currently available in the public domain. Yeah, certainly. So invariably you need to be an Australian-based company. You need to have incurred your expenditure on Australian-based employees or contractors. And then the other things that you can claim, of course, are the associated overheads with the R&D development. You can make claims for overseas-based R&D activities, but that process requires you to get advanced registration. And the advanced registration process is to ensure that we're not looking overseas merely to exploit a cheaper labour market, and that the availability of that expertise or IP isn't available here. So the difference would be if you were to go overseas, you need advanced registration. You need to make sure that you're not claiming more than 50% of the total project costs. Certainly very subjective. I like to hear about people's failures, and that can be quite an insecure discussion to have. But ultimately, if you're highly qualified, you're an industry expert in your field, you've had runs on the board in specific projects within that niche, and you're running into problems, often problems can be the catalyst for technical complexity, innovation, risk, and then a knowledge gap ultimately to be able to solve them. I think the biggest risk of making an R&D tax claim is because it's a self-assessed regime. What a self-assessed regime means is you apply to AusIndustry, you prepare your application form, they often just provide you with a notice of registration for your R&D activities. Then you go away to the ATO, you lodge your tax return, and often you receive your R&D tax refund. A lot of businesses think that because they've received their refund, because they've received registration, that they're home free and that they've been approved. However, like all self-assessed regimes, there's always the risk, and certainly when you make R&D tax claims and in specific industries, there's always a risk of audit subsequent to receiving the refund. So it's important to make sure that you understand the compliance regime, understand how certain industries in particular are targeted, and making sure that you can substantiate a claim that you did in today, where you may not be audited until 2 years later. To be fair to both the ATO and Oz Industry, they've certainly come a long way with the availability of information on their websites and also industry-specific type of scenarios and examples. In software where we get caught up, particularly in an agile development environment, is no one really likes to plan, no one really likes to structure. So we need to make sure that there is a planned and structured approach to understanding our knowledge gap, resolving the knowledge gap, proving that there's a knowledge gap as well. But then at the same time too, once again, it can be subjective. You know, it's not just developing new knowledge, it can be taking existing knowledge and applying it in a new way. And so therefore then when we do that, we need to make sure that we understand why existing technologies can't be used in that environment and what the complexities and the knowledge gaps are. So certainly full and thorough documentation and evidence can take numerous forms. It can be as simple as recordings, either via audio or via Zoom. It can be certainly making sure that we keep testing notes, records of our literature reviews, records of our experimentation, all of those sorts of things. Where claims come unstuck is there's not enough evidence to support the experiment that's been undertaken. And often, you know, 90% of claims, that's where they fall down. They don't even enter into a discussion as to whether or not it's novel, whether or not there's a knowledge gap. They don't get past the first hurdle of not even being able to substantiate what they've done. I think it's good practice in business generally to understand in our normal workflow environment what projects we get involved in that we would consider standard projects, and what projects we get involved in that we'd consider perhaps special projects. And then through that discussion, you know, trying to identify where there might be knowledge gaps within the delivery of those projects. Certainly it's the bugbear. Often people don't know that a project is going to be R&Dable until they get, you know, down the path of getting involved in a project before they realise that it's become more than they understood. That's okay, but as long as we have, you know, meeting notes along the way, and it doesn't need to be overly complicated. It can be something as simple as I said, emails, recorded message, videos, team meeting notes, all of those sorts of things. Make sure that you understand your compliance regime, most definitely. Make sure that you're working with service providers and also specialist R&D tax incentive advisors as well, to ensure that your claim is really, really robust. Sure, there's a commerciality there. Does the benefit you're going to receive outweigh the investment in making sure that you're compliant? And often sometimes clients or applicants won't make a claim because the benefit does not outweigh. However, certainly you don't want to be in a position where you get an audit for a historical year and you fail, and then suddenly you get audited for the preceding years, particularly if you're in a loss situation where you've received, you know, fairly chunky refunds, and suddenly then you're in a position where you have to pay back. It can be quite detrimental, and even some businesses, you know, they go into liquidation after that. Definitely. So the R&D Tax Incentive is a federal government program, but each of the Australian states invariably have their own types of programs. Important to distinguish between what we'd consider an entitlement or an incentive-based program versus a competitive-based program. So research and development tax incentives are based on eligibility, based on legislation where you tick the box, you will receive an entitlement. Some of the competitive type of programs are based on merit. So Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Western Australia all have their own types of competitive-based grants, and some of them can be quite concessionary as well. So in Queensland there's a competitive-based program called Ignite Ideas, and it has two tranches of payment, one up to $100,000 and one up to $200,000 as well. And often these grants can complement each other. The R&D Tax Incentive is really the only research and development focused program that's available nationally. There are some small government grant programs at a state level that might incentivise R&D, but generally they are for commercialisation. So the Ignite Ideas program, for example, in Queensland is all about commercialising that technology. The federal government also have the Accelerating Commercialisation program as well. It can support business on a dollar-for-dollar basis up to $1 million. So they complement each other in terms of developing a product and then how we get the product into the market. And often they work well with each other in terms of funding and stage of development, etc. Our website is www.rdtaxandgrants.com.au. You're welcome to contact us through our website or me directly at Matt, M-A-T-T, at rdtaxandgrants.com.au. Happy to have a complimentary discussion around your activities, around what type of government grant programs might be available. Anecdotally, I guess some of the biggest disappointments I've had to express on people is that they've missed their opportunity because, like all programs, they are time driven and deadlines are in place to make sure that you need to make a claim for certain financial year ends, and without making that claim within the defined period, you forego the opportunity.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.